Dr. Sherice J. Nelson has been our number one person to talk about the Ukraine-Russia issue. How are you doing today, Sherice?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk. Well, I'm not excited to talk about how Black women's bodies are used as political pawns, but I am excited to talk about uh, centering this Black woman that I think is being forgotten.
Right. So this is, I'm glad you mentioned that. Brittney Griner is the woman that we're talking about. When we talked about Ukraine and Russia over these past, I would say 2 months, two and a half months now, maybe three, because we started talking about this in February.
Yeah, so it's been about 3.
Yeah, about 3 months. We talked about many different aspects of what's going on, and we wanted to really tease out angles that mainstream media often ignores or underreports. So we went very heavily on the racial issues that were going on. We talked about how Africa is connected to what's going on in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, war. But now, and I spoke about this with Dame Crawford, who we got to have a podcast. He's been talking about that as well. But he said, maybe about like a month and a half, 2 months ago, he said, we really need to talk about Brittney Griner. She has been totally lost in the folds of what's going on in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. For those of you who do not know, sometime in February, Brittney Griner, who was a WNBA phenom, is a star, also plays in European League for a Russian team, was detained when she was flying into Russia for having, this is what the Russian officials say, for having cartridges of cannabis or vape with cannabis in it. She has been detained by Russia since then. And there really hasn't been, what we know, a lot of movement around her to get her out. One of the things that has come out of that is that when Lisa Leslie, who is a veteran WNBA player, said that they were instructed by the WNBA not to really talk about it because it was believed that Griner is a political pawn for Russia, trying to push the envelope or push whatever agenda it is in terms of its contentious relationship with the U.S. and U.S. involvement in this conflict. Brittney, she was supposed to get out sometime in May, but they said that they've extended her detention now, and so we have more insight that Sherice is going to bring us. What do you know, and what are your thoughts?
So my first thoughts are the idea, like I said, about the idea that a Black woman's body is consistently and always the object of fodder throughout the world. And I said this to the state of Black Shreveport in February when I was there, that Black women possess the mitochondrial Eve, meaning that Black women are the first women that were appeared here on planet Earth. And for us to be the first, we definitely get treated like the last. And so that I think that's the first thing. I think that her release has become complicated. And I truly believe as a political scientist that her release has become complicated because now Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, are talking about joining NATO for protection. And I do not think it, I do not think it a robbery that once reports started coming out about these Nordic nations who have, for the most part, remained neutral in European wars. Now their willingness, right, to come out of neutrality and say, no, we want to become members of NATO, I truly believe has complicated her release. And I don't believe anybody wants to truly talk about that because I truly believe that a Black woman's body is litigated, tried, decided upon, and has so many ramifications that people would prefer to sweep it under the rug or push it down in the name of being silent. I also understand that there are some political back channels and conversations that are being had about the nature of her release. And from what I understand about the nature of that, is that there's some public shame that they want to put on the United States, or her sexuality is definitely being used as another tool or a pawn, because Brittney Griner is married and her wife is pregnant. And
so Russia is saying that is unfavorably of LGBTQ lifestyle.
Correct. Okay. They are unfavorable to LGBTQ plus lifestyles. And in many ways, I truly believe are trying to psychologically break her because her wife is currently pregnant. And from what I understand is later in the pregnancy, and the detention of her could then make her then miss the birth of their child.
So that is the political. What has been, do you know, what is the official, or what is the White House response on why it seems to be that there isn't much being done about Griner's detention?
Their official response has basically been, it is unfortunate that she has been detained, that they are using diplomatic couriers and diplomatic channels for her release. That has just basically been the statement. And anytime you have a statement that is that generic, that terse, then well, us political scientists know, right? Us that study this, and I'm not expecting anybody else to care about it as much as we do. But anytime I hear that as a political scientist, I know that there is so many more angles that are being evaluated that they do not want to be fodder in the news and the media cycle. And many people would say at this point, or Russia also quips, or China also quips, see, if you would control your media, you wouldn't have this problem, right? You would be able to negotiate more free hand. And you and I, Kyle, would say, but they do control the media, right? They may not control it as outwardly as a Russia or a China, right? But the United States still does in many ways control the media, because if you've noticed, we haven't seen as many questions from mainstream media about Brittney Griner either. You know, we have not seen much discussion from the mainstream media about her, right? So the idea that we do not have some level of control of the media, I think, is a farce. And I do believe that that she's being used as a political pawn for all of the things that the United States says it believes in.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said in the pre-show, I have been in conversation with several organizations, Black feminist organizations, who are outraged at the level of silence that has gone on in the media cycles. You know, on one hand, there's this huge push. Let's just talk about the LGBTQ plus lean. But there's this huge silence of a Black woman who's an Olympic, two-time Olympic gold medalist. She has a wonderful career. She's a champion, very much celebrated in the WNBA. She has been a stellar representation of female athletics, and also a representation of LGBTQ plus community, and has very little backing. I haven't even seen a lot of organizations come out and talk about her. Like, where is the outrage? Where are the protests, even outside of just the political channels? Like, let's talk about the formal political channels, the organizing, you know. And Dame and I talked about this. If this would have been LeBron James, this world would have been turned inside out over a LeBron James or a Tom Brady. It would have been World War 28, 29, and 30.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, because to me, that's half the problem. Brittney Griner wouldn't needed to be in Russia if she was getting paid enough to play here in the United States. So my thing is, you're right. If this was LeBron James or Tom Brady, well, if it was Tom Brady, like you said, we would have been in World War III by now. But even if it's LeBron James, right, then this would be far bigger of an issue. but neither one of them would have had to go to a foreign nation to then play, to then take care of their families, right? The idea that the WNBA, from a funding perspective, hasn't found a way to increase funding when we know that the that the NCAA, when it comes to women's sports, has found a funding matrix that works, lets me know then that we need to seriously have a conversation about the fact that Brittney Griner need to go to Russia to play anyway, right? And so you're exactly right. I think that that I think if we set her sexuality aside for a moment, I think that her sexuality is the only reason we're even having the discussion. I think that if she wasn't of the LGBTQ plus community, that we wouldn't have known about her at all. And the reason I say that is because and even for a woman that would have played on an Olympic team, I know a few women that play on a team in Italy, and they got detained, and they were not members of the Olympic team, but they trained with the Olympic team, if that makes sense. They weren't members of the United States Olympic team, but they trained with them, and they were treated just like any other Black woman that was traveling in Europe, right? And in one situation, they got detained in Sicily, in Italy, and it took them almost a month to be able to get back home to the United States, right? So and that was a few years ago, probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And so I would argue that if it were not for her sexuality, the little media coverage or the highlighting of the situation wouldn't have even made mainstream at all if her sexuality wasn't in question.
Right. Yeah, I do. And also connected to the timing. Though. Right. Exactly. And also connected to the timing of, you know what I'm saying, what's going on. I could totally see that happening in Sicily. Sicily is the Blackest part of Italy, but it's very racist to Black people, having experienced some of the most sordid, blatant racism in my time in Italy was definitely in Sicily. But that's a whole, that's a whole other, that's a whole other conversation. I could actually, one of our writers for Ark Republic, I don't know if she still lives in Sicily, but Sicily is a very interesting space in terms of anti-Blackness, but we'll talk about that on another.
But if you want to connect that, that's the other piece to me about these Nordic nations, if that makes sense. So these Nordic nations are, I mean, if we want to talk about racial categorizations, I mean, Finland, Norway, I mean, they're white,
very right.
So we're talking about very white nations trying to get because the Russian government said that she was going to be released here in May, right?
Right.
As soon as we get close to her release, and it's also then publicized that these very white nations want to get into NATO for protection. Now, all of a sudden, her release gets into question. To me, it's then again not by accident, right?
And so, definitely, I agree.
And so what I'm saying is to that very Sicily point, right? That things could appear one way, if that makes sense. Things could appear one way, but as soon as whiteness is recentered, then it doesn't matter what decisions have been made previously, they all snap back. So even if you're in an area I want folks to see what I mean by this comparison between Sicily and then these Nordic countries, is that although Sicily may be super Black and these are the areas, as soon as you center whiteness, as soon as you decide that whiteness and the preservation of whiteness is the most important, then the idea of then the meaning and then the holistic meaning and the weight of Blackness immediately drops.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think also what we were talking about, we need to do something on Italy and Blackness. I got to definitely invite some other people so we can have just being Black in Europe and that nuanced perspective. We could talk about, but I don't want to get too far off in terms of the Brittney Griner issue. But right. I cannot, you said this in the beginning, I cannot emphasize this enough. how basically the political atmosphere, the center of what's going on now in terms of between the tension between certainly Russia and the US is based on a Black woman, right? This is based on a Black woman. And as much as people can say, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, no, Brittney Griner is a very huge part of the chess piece on the chessboard, and talking about this geopolitical politics and the conflict and how the U.S. moves. I'm really interested to see and know what will happen in terms of her detainment, and what her story will be, afterwards. However, I do hold organizations like the WNBA responsible and accountable not only for underpaying its people, but also being so caught up in its capitalistic aspirations that it doesn't mention it and is using, oh, well, this is a political thing, we don't want to do that. That's complete and total utter bullshit. Excuse my language. And I think it even is more egregious that I just saw recently, there's like this Sports Illustrated cover that's like sexifying some of the WNBA members. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, wow, I said they couldn't hold that off. Like that, to me, it's like trying to, cover what really, is going on. And this attempt to soften and make a more feminine presentation of the WNBA right when this issue that has so much intersectionality involved in it is going on, such as Brittney Griner. So I do have to say, free Brittney Griner, and we're going to keep abreast of this. You have the last thoughts, Madame.
What I will say is that the body of a Black woman has been at the heart of American conversations from the very beginning. When we think about this, or we understand it from a slavery perspective, our ability to reproduce and reproduce children that then could labor was at the center of that. The commodification of our bodies has always been at the center of the United States conversation throughout the world, right? Mm-hmm. Because that is an international relations issue, because slavery was an international issue. And I'm not by any means saying that the WNBA is participating in slavery. But what I am saying is that the commodification of the Black woman's body, and then a disregard for her wholeness and her being, consistently plays out regardless of what generation you are born in as a Black woman in these United States. Mm.
Well, good points. Well put. Thank you once again, Dr. Sherice J. Nelson, for talking to Ark Republic. We will get up again.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times, to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times, so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.